think it's visible, right? Great. And if I happen to forget to switch to the next slide, which happens to me a lot when I do a presentation, so just let me know. There are a number of slides, and I hope that I won't miss, but please, yeah, Gabrielle, intervene when you find me just missing any of these slides. Um, so I'm based in Ottawa, and Ottawa is like the unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. And as Gabrielle mentioned, our organization is hosted at Carleton. And I want to start this presentation by just acknowledging the moment that we are in and how we are as people who care about the environment and climate change is it's tricky times for us. As the planet warms, there is more wildfires. I just chatted with Gabrielle about the fires in Manitoba and how early they happen now. There are more extreme heat. There is more floods, and it's taking a toll. But at the same time, while all of this is urgent, climate change has become really a tricky topic and to deal with. Do we say climate change or we shouldn't? And so, from a comms perspective, there are a lot of conversations about what is the best way to talk about climate as right now. Should we talk about climate change or like other concerns that people have? And just there are, and the reason is that we are wondering about this because we see how people are shifting and changing in their attitudes and concerns, and there are shifting priorities. And there are many explanations for these shifting priorities, including technological, emotional, cognitive, and social reasons. But also for parents and caregivers, it's this issue is it has a it's bringing up a lot of fear and anxiety. I was reading a study just a couple of days ago about how kids were born after 2020. They would face many extreme events that their parents and grandparents have not faced, and so it's like I was down for the whole day just thinking about my kids and their future. So it's really an emotional subject. We're also in a moment of political changes. Some of it is expected, some of it is not, which makes the things more complicated, and also which gives more space because of this uncertainty for misinformation and greenwashing. And sometimes people end up feeling that really no one gets what they're concerned about, or no one is on their side. And also there's the shifting media landscape where people tune out of mainstream media to new sources of information. So all of this makes it really a complicated terrain for communicators to talk about climate change. And when I say communicators, is anybody who really want to talk about climate change and want to urge people to do something about it. And my point of just saying this is not to start as a pessimistic tone, but really that we need to acknowledge that this is challenging and that it can feel sometimes that the ground is constantly moving. And what I want to share today is first is to make sense of what is happening. Where are Canadians at? So although everything feels sometimes moving and there are some changing, right? Trends in how people perceive or think about climate change. But at the same time, and this is really important, there are durable trends and concerns that people have, and it's really helpful to know what is on top of people's mind and what is changing. And then after that, I will go from there offering some evidence-based or research-based strategies and tools that can help a little bit in tackling the issue and talking about climate change when it feels it's tricky to do so. So I'll start with this chart. And this is from our public opinion research. So at Re.Climate, we do a roll-up of all surveys that have been published in the last year to see, to notice these shifts and patterns, and then report them in a report that we usually launch between April and June. And this year we'll do it in June. Um, and one of the things that we have seen in this research is actually um, the climate concern is really still there. There's no doubt that people in Canada are concerned about climate change, and climate change has stayed on their mind. Even if you notice if this pattern through like in 2019 and 2020, you notice that the people who conceive climate change as a serious threat have even gone up a bit during these 2 years. Balling from Innovative Research Group actually shows that it is 67% Canadians are concerned about climate change. And although the concern, as you see in the chart, it's dropped a little bit, and also the people who are not concerned have gone a bit. Um, there are other factors we assume that have just deprioritized or causing this decline. Inflation and cost of living and housing and affordability, which might have pushed it down the list. If you look here, this table shows the priorities that or the important problems Canadians think that they are facing, and you notice is that cost of living got from 8 to 33 points, and economy gone a bit, but healthcare is stayed consistent. But if you notice, climate change has gone down through as a priority. So, in spite of that, I would say is that the story is really not about declining concern. It is about competition with other priorities. So while climate change may slip as a priority in some of these charts, does not mean that the concern is fading. It's more reflective how climate is competing with more immediate everyday worries like affordability and healthcare and housing. But concern is still deeply felt, especially, I would say, among parents. In our survey roll-up, we found that 89% of Canadian parents say they fear for their children's future, and that's really a 7-point increase from previous years. And the biggest threat they see is affordability, but also they mention food security and climate change as the causes for their anxiety. I'll go to the next slide. So there's this, solid concern, but what unfortunately we have seen is that the knowledge about the causes of climate literacy, it has declined. So this chart taken from a survey done by Re.Climate with Enviroanalytics reinforces just how 50%, around 50%, yes, get it. They get that burning of fossil fuel is the main cause of climate change. However, a lot of people point out to different things. And you notice is that it's not even one another thing, but there's equal distribution of how people see the different what is the main cause of climate change. And notice here the not sure is 11% of people. So there's a great opportunity to educate the public about how climate change happens and what causes this. And what we know is that burning fossil fuels account for the majority of global carbon emissions. But that piece is still missing. And if you wonder why Why is that? Yes, there's misinformation, there's greenwashing, and but mainstream media even is not making clear the case of climate change. So last year we looked at stories that were published in mainstream national media. We selected five of them, and then we looked at 700 stories on climate change. And notice how only just from the 700, notice how the fossil fuel burning is just 70 stories. So 1 in 10 stories link it climate change or mention it, fossil fuels beside climate change. So and even this gets less with oil sands or with the specific ones or natural gas. So this creates like a problem, but without a cause. So the public hears about the climate change, but they are not hearing about what is driving the issue. And if we are not naming the cause, then it's really hard to build support for real solutions. If people don't get why this is happening, then it'll be hard to engage them around the right climate action that is needed. Um, Sorry, I think I skipped so many. So while here for this chart, and this is another piece of puzzle. So yes, it is about a discourse on knowledge, but also concern about climate change is political. And so this chart shows how people's political leanings shape their view of how they perceive the seriousness of the climate change threat. So 75% of NDP voters think climate change is a very serious threat for 74 in liberal voters. But if you look at conservative voters, then that goes to 19%. So, and this is consistent for other issues. So if you ask people if they've noticed climate impact have increased or decreased, then they would, depending on their political affiliation, that number would change. So we would find more agreement with liberal or NDP voters, and then less agreement from conservative voters. And but just like as an important nuance, I want to highlight. So in that it doesn't mean necessarily that someone who has conservative values is will be hard to engage, or that it will be that we will that that they're completely they will completely shut off the conversation. So there's difference between people who vote conservative, and that's a political question, and those who hold conservative values. So again, I want to refer to the research that Re.Climate did with Eco Analytics. They did a research that consisted of surveys and focus groups, and about 6,000 surveys to try to understand Canadians and to put them in segments according to their climate values. And what they found is five segments. I'm not going to go into details about each segment, but one of these groups is called civic nationals, and they make about around 21% of the Canadian population. And it's what is interesting is that these people are community oriented, they are connected to nature, they're concerned about climate change and its impact. At the same time, they may hold anti-immigration values, they're relatively car dependent, and they can swing in their votes between conservative and other parties. Just like what this tells us is that we need to be careful about making assumptions. And for a group like Civic Nationals, really nature and community are the entry points that you can engage with them and talk to them about climate change. Um, for this question, I want to highlight another strong um, trend or something or positive. What we call it is, tailwind, something that we can use as an opportunity is that there's really solid support for renewables. And the majority of every region in Canada support expanding solar, expanding wind and hydropower. Canadians want the next generation to have access to renewable energy. They want greener jobs and they would choose renewable energy to power their homes over fossil fuel. But it's what's interesting as well, and this is, seems contradictory, is that the number of also people who say that oil and gas is important to current economy in 2025 jumped from 79% to 88%. And those who think that the industry is important for Canada's future economy also went up from 59% of the population to 70% of the population. And this could be that when people feel uncertain and security has become an important issue for Canadians, is that the oil and gas industry, it's a familiar industry, so it seems like a safe bet. It's familiar and so it provides that stability, which renewable yet has not started to um, to be that promising. And what does this mean? We need to do a better job of having a different version, a different vision for Canada's economy, one that is built around clean energy and what the clean energy can promise us. Um, and and just speaking about green technology, many rush that if we want people to adopt clean technology, then we just need to offer incentives. If you want people to install heat pumps, if you want them to buy EVs, then we can offer these incentives, and that will do the thing. But um, you know, through research that has been done by Re.Climate is that, it's just a lot more than money. It matters how people perceive these technologies and how effective they are and how reliable they are. And their ability to access it also plays a role. Is it easy to install a heat pump? Is it possible to buy an EV even in the first place? Is my EV gonna be, it'll be reliable during winter? Is the electric grid gonna be reliable in all the seasons? So these are really that matter to people even more than affordability. Um, and also, one important thing that is matter is that fairness and how they perceive these climate technologies and policies are, they are fair. So they might bulk at messaging, for example, that ask them to buy heat pumps and EVs, even if they feel that the technology is not going to work, or that it's impacting just lower income. It's going to be just something that will be burdensome for lower income people than other people. So people care about how fair these policies are and who bears the burden. And these are important factors if you want that the people see the fairness in around these, if you want them really to move towards more clean technologies and to be supporting climate policies. Just last trend, and then I'm gonna go into what we can do about it, is in terms of climate education. It's a lot of Canadians want the education system to do a lot more to teach young people about climate change. But there is a bit of a gap as teachers and educators feel they lack the knowledge and the skills to teach climate material effectively. Um, so I would say that um, it's not just about it's not just about that desire, but I think there's a big opportunity for parents and communities and outside organizations to step in and support. And I see like for kids is stepping in, and just the latest report on the funding of curriculum. And I mean, that's a really great step towards that direction. Um, and uh, that's it for now. I can go on and talk like, but if you guys want also to have a break, and just if you have any questions, and then I can move to the next part. Just I feel like it's been a lot getting sharing a lot of things with you people. So maybe you need a few minutes to process.
And I'm just seeing a couple of questions in the chat. Maybe, I don't know if folks
Okay.
wanted to address it now. We can also do it later. I guess Trish had a question about wondering what stories have been affected, or what stories break through given this
Mm.
sort of data. And I don't know if you'll be getting into that a little bit in the next part, but I don't know if you have any thoughts on that quickly.
Yeah, I think it will go. Yeah, well, if that's a question, I think that we can go from, yeah, then I'll go to the next slides. I think these are going to be answering the question of like, what are the things that we can do to break through? So, uh, um, so like I hinted as a few things, but I'd like to share some of the advice that Re.Climate or and other researchers have tested and they found as effective so far. So just so far this is what has been proven as valuable, but I would always follow. That's what we do at Reclimate is that we always test and make sure that what we offer is really matching what the research is telling us at the moment, that that this is the reality or this is what is effective. One thing that I would suggest for now is that to continue to talk about climate change. There has been some suggestion that it's time for us now to abandon this and replace it with to talk about business and economy. And we need to talk about climate and come to it from the front door and make it matter at this moment by actually again asking what is worth protecting. Why are we doing this? So people need a big reason to accept change, and through a lot of the research that has been done, people care about climate because they care about future generations. So caring, wanting to protect the people and the places they love, that's the main really motivator for people to go into climate action. So um, that is just one of the things that we found. So and that's why I would say is that as parents, it becomes and caregivers, that's where they can be really great fit as messengers. And they don't need to be climate experts and sophisticated in their knowledge about climate science or climate tech or climate. What matters is really how they are and how they show up in conversation, sharing their own experiences. As a parent, you already have credibility. When we looked at the 5 audiences in Canada, the most influential group, and we looked at scientists, politicians, family and friends, and like we identified different groups to see where people feel that these are the most influential group in their own decisions, and family and friends are among the most trusted messenger. And given that people care about protecting future generations, that's where the credibility of the parent come as really powerful. So instead of worrying about the facts and just that you all get or that you get all the facts, what does matter is why this issue matters to your family. What kind of future do you want to, for your kids? How has that been challenging you for as a parent? So we need more of these stories and messages, and to have that impact. So parents need and caregivers need to trust themselves as really as people who can be influential in the conversation that we have about climate change. Um, Another thing is that there are we don't need to get all the facts, but there are a few facts that we need to repeat them over and over, and to educate people about this is climate change is happening. Climate change is mainly caused by the burning of fossil fuels. Um, the oil and gas sector is the most contributor to greenhouse gas emissions, and Canada also contributes is a contributor to global emissions. So these are some facts that have been really uh, not showing up as much, and they will resonate if they come through two ways, either through stories or through really repeating the messages over or repeating the data over. So that's why when we work with media, we'll let them know is that well, one of the gaps that we see that climate change stories is not mentioning about the cause of climate change. And so if it's not brought up again, then that is going to be a big gap in public knowledge. And it's going to be a factor in how people will be engaging with climate policies and climate action. So definitely repeating some of these facts. Um, and also is looking at the audiences, I really recommend, and I'll be sharing the list after this meeting, the 5 Canada research and these audiences. And one of the things that we have seen through the research also is that uh, when you talk about those who are more engaged and more concerned, use gain frame messaging means is that okay, by doing this your life will become more affordable. You will have a healthy community. These are the type of messaging that works with more engaged and more concerned audiences. For those who are less concerned, then loss framed messages, which means is that you will lose money by not shifting if you stick just to, for example, gas powered furnace. So gain and loss messages, just like these, they sound as unimportant, but really they play a role in how people respond. Also, we noted through the research is that the 5 Canadas, especially civic nationals, feel strongly about making polluters pay. They want them to share the burden. So if we frame clean energy regulation as measures that ensure oil and gas companies take responsibility for climate action and they just do not get the pass, that's a message that resonates with many people. Um, And also, um, um, sorry, I think I skipped one slide. Just one thing that I want to highlight this a lot is, uh, you know, we underestimate how other people worry about climate change and how much they are doing. And that's what is called a perception gap. And it plays really an important role if you tell people that you're not alone. There are a lot of people like you who are concerned, people who want polluters to pay, people who care about climate. That type of messaging is really important. And it's amazing how it's been consistent in all the research is that social norms play a big role. So if you think that others are doing, then people feel that they are part of something bigger, and they would be much more motivated to do something about it. Saying that Canadians want change, that people support green technology, is really helpful. That they feel that again that they are part of a bigger movement, and that a feeling that there's a sense of momentum that is going. Um, and Also, we need to focus on people and choices, not just policies or and technology. And there's the message on the right of the slide of, to avoid also abstract concepts or technological language. So we should abandon like, energy transition or net zero. This is language that really work when you talk to policy folks, but not much when you talk um, to people who it doesn't matter for them really, that kind of language. So focus on the people, focus on how people are impacted and what they can do to help. Just, I'll end with this, just some imagery advice, and it's part of your communication if you are planning to be engaged in media, especially, or to share any materials. Importance are like images are really important in conveying and getting people. So to do to engage and inspire them to action. So the research, so there's climate visuals program in the UK. They've done great work in providing like in seven or offering seven evidence-based principle for choosing images, and one of the main principle is that show real people. And it really reflects again of like the point that I've just mentioned about how people are more likely to engage with climate change when they see imagery of people like themselves living their everyday life. It's also I want that one of the like another principle that they have is that to show climate change impact at scale, but also locally. So these are just to offer the wide and the local impacts are important, and also and also is just one of the things is that to provide emotionally powerful images that are emotionally powerful. And I will just go through a few images that we found at Re.Climate as really powerful and demonstrate these principles. So, for example, here the picture on the left is really by Jesse Winter, who's a photojournalist, a Canadian photojournalist, and he's done a great job in taking photos of wildfires. But it's not just, it's not just a wildfire, but showing firefighters and communities, or the picture on the right showing a farmer who's also impacted. So showing these impacts are important, and how people are experiencing it and feeling it, rather than just a distant photo of wildfires that is happening somewhere in Canada. And this also applied to I'm going to use the technical language, but again, energy transition of like instead of showing pictures of solar and um, wind turbine field, what really is effective is showing these with people around them, or people, even using or installing or having heat pumps installed in their homes, or so these are missing. And actually, because we know that one of the main principles is that to show humans, we have difficulty really, or we had for a long while, and still we do. But I mean, we've got a few resources, and I'm happy to share them with you. Is that to show these technologies with people? Again, the same principle with wildfire impacts or the climate weather impact is that it's important to show how these are impacting the people and responding to these events. Um, and That's it for now.
Mhm. Thanks so much, Geta. That's great. That's a really helpful overview. I'm wondering if a few folks have put questions in the chat, and maybe I can start by sort of sharing a few and we can keep the conversation going if that works. If folks want to come up, we're not a huge group. So if anyone wants to sort of come off mute and share their question, they can do that, or I can ask it for you. But I think first on my list, I have Meg, and I'm wondering whether Meg, you'd like to share your question um, or I can pose it for you if you like, if you're still
Can you
here.
hear me?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so I'm on my phone, so sorry if the sound quality sucks. Um, that was such a fabulous presentation. Thank you so much. I was asking specifically about Carney killing the carbon tax. Sorry if I'm using like right-wing language for that policy. But I just thought it was like it was quietly devastating because my
Mm.
understanding is that climate tax or like taxing carbon is like a super effective way of reducing CO2 in the Earth's atmosphere. But like, is that a political win for politicians, or how should we be thinking about that policy change in terms of if we talk to our communities or MPs and the media? Um, like, is it as devastating as I've internalized it to be, or are there other better policy alternatives to that?
Yeah, that this is really a good question. Um, and yes, and unfortunately, carbon tax is one of those policies that has been proven to be effective, that it worked other places, that it worked in Canadian provinces, but then at the end it faced opposition and it ended. And we are actually doing this postpartum analysis of carbon tax, not, and I want to be honest, not like just hoping that to be revived, but more of what do we learn from this and what do we avoid and apply in future climate policies, especially like if because industrial taxing might be something, carbon taxing might be something that is going to happen, and we just notice also the same issues of, for example, misinformation, that the costs, even if it's on industries, there's a now assumption that these costs are actually trickling down to consumers. So the consumers would be the people who would be paid for the cost. Um, we are doing, actually, we are involved as a Re.Climate of just, this is one of our project of understanding why it failed and what is we can do. But I can share with you a few things that might be helpful. One of the things is that when we did our media analysis, we looked at carbon tax and we looked how it was framed. Most majority, the majority, except the Toronto Star, framed it as a political issue. It's a contestation between two parties, um, and nothing about it being a climate policy or why it works or why is it effective. So that really an important gap. I wouldn't say that's the only reason, but that's really important in understanding of of like how the conversation has been around this from the beginning, and how is just being framed as a political issue rather than a climate policy. It was just the first sign of its demise. Um, another thing is that and this is work that we hope we can step in as well as and do more work, is policies usually are done by economists, engineers, technicians, but really not many social scientists are there, or people who think about it from a communication perspective. For example, in the survey that we have done, people would prefer that the rebates that they get from a carbon tax would go to mitigation and adaptation action rather than as rebates. So it's not only about money. So when it was done, it was just think, oh, this is really a fair policy. There's, there's tax, but there are rebates, so it's really revenue neutral. People will get it, and that's it. But people want, like, they want to build something out of it, and they didn't see this as came out of it. So it's really a question about communication, but it's also a question about the policy design and who should be involved even in the design of the policies from the beginning. And we will be doing more work. We don't know yet how that work will show up. Is it going to be a report or a webinar? But as you said, I mean, it's been disappointing for many people, those who are working in climate advocacy, and so just seeing a policy that is effective that has gone down. But it's really helpful to understand what happened, just to, again, not to repeat the cycle with other policies.
Thanks so much, Kat, and thanks for the question, Meg. The next person I had on my list from the chat was Steph, about sort of this balancing of scientific facts with storytelling stuff. I don't know if you wanted to jump on and share your question, or if you're around here. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think it's just that balance of trying to find my tendency is to start from the science facts and thinking that'll change people's minds because it feels very obvious to me in that sense, but I know that's not always the case. But yeah, I guess especially if we're talking about someone with a really different view, or like really different, coming from like just a really different place of like of their approach to these things, then I'm not sure like where does that, yeah, what kind of stories, I guess, have we found that bridges that gap? Does that make sense? Like if we're already feeling like there is a gap, then yeah, what where do we start? Or like what kind of stories, I guess, make sense? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I would say like really human stories. I think that, I mean, scientists have been doing great work, but they've been sharing the data for years and years. And I would say that was not been helpful. I mean, a lot of people got into the story, but what is missing really is more stories of people, and how that impacts them. So it's really sharing more of experiences. When we looked at wildfires, for example, last year, the dominant voices who are referenced and cited in these stories were mostly politicians. And so we didn't see many of those who are not only impacted, just like, there's a lot of emphasis by those who are impacted, evacuees and displaced people. And this is important, but those who are impacted, their health has been impacted. The stories of, how it affected their insurance, or so there are different angles. So I would say is like, let's try new stories, new angles. What is needed is really more angles to bring in rather than focus on one. And that would be really helpful in getting. And it's just like I would say is like for parents and caregivers, I mean, that is really important. And just like trusting themselves that they are a powerful voice and impactful, that's an important thing to do.
Thank you. Yeah, I know my question wasn't super clear, so I appreciate you
No,
putting
not at
words
all.
to it.
Thanks so much, Steph. Yeah, and if more questions come up from what you're hearing, feel free to pop them in the chat. I wanted to ask Beth's question. Beth, I don't know if you want to speak to your question, if you're here.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, I guess I just was curious. My husband and I have kind of, I think he's actually blocked now from some text lines in like just responding to media. But
Mm.
you know, we've sort of tried to make sure that whenever they're reporting on climate, that they're bringing up the cause. And I'm just curious if there's anything that you have in terms of like what's been, you know, what works. Is there something that works? Is there, yeah, any guidance around that? Yeah.
Around, you mean pitching to media and having your story published?
No, I mean, I guess just like how do we encourage whether it's mainstream media or any media to like speak to the full story, right? Like to and it's not even like just add the extra sentence like climate change caused by burning of fossil fuels or whatever, right? Like I don't know how if we can't literally speak those words out loud, then like it feels very I feel very defeated by that. So is there any way that you have seen that like more success in getting media to speak plainly? Or anyone like who gets on the radio, like politicians as well, right? How do we get them to say the words?
Hmm. You know, that's a good question. And we wrote a blog actually just about this of how to boost climate coverage. And I would be happy to share it just here. And there are like really some great tips. And it's written by our strategic director, who was a journalist herself. Um, but I think is that like it's when we were doing the media reports and looking at how media covers it, we were upset as a climate also organization of like, why is this not mentioned and why is this not talked about? Um, and then we thought about an approach that what if we try to build these relationships further with journalists and instead of coming as person who criticizes them, that we can try to build that relationship. And I would say that I was at a conference for journalists, and the number of people who I've been to so many conferences, I've never heard layoffs and budgets as I heard in that conference. So newsroom are really suffering, and it's really journalists are living at an income that is lower, I would say, than other people. So I would say it's a lot also, it's not about intention, but it's a lot about capacity. And what we can do is to offer that support through more op-ed, but also materials that can be easy to glance at and to look at. So if you have an infographic that is helpful, share it. If you think that there's going to be a wildfire in Alberta or somewhere soon and media has not started, so share in advance these materials that would be helpful. For example, showing the attribution of how these wildfires are actually caused by climate change. So make their job easier, just so that they know that they can do it. So I would say the best approach is to engage more with reporters and journalists. And another approach actually is, and this is something that probably not a lot of news have third party officials who monitor. Like for CBC, they have ombudsman, ombudsman, so you can write to them really, and they are obligated as CBC to respond to your complaint. So if you haven't seen, like if you looked at stories of Manitoba and you noticed that there's no mention of climate change, by writing to the ombudsman, then they will take that seriously, and CBC is obligated, for example, to answer your question and to show that actually either this has not happened or how they will address this. So there are different mechanisms, but I really encourage to look at these recommendations to look at how to support. Like at Re.Climate, we offer we offered workshops for journalists, for example, to look at help help with the coverage and provide resources. So hopefully that's helpful. I know that's not everyone is capable of doesn't have the time to engage with media, especially if they are not quite responsive. But I would say is like don't lose hope. The more we do this, really, it's come to the point where they are obligated to respond. And so when they see the urgency, then and that they see that this is something that people got, then they would respond.
Thanks very much. Those are some great points. If you have an infographic on wildfire attribution, I would love to see that.
Actually, we have developed a list of resources. I'll be happy to, yeah, I'll share them in the list of resources of like attribution, economic impact of climate. So there are different subjects, and each there are resources that show where does what are the resources under each a theme. So I'll be sharing with that in the slide deck that we'll share with Gabrielle after this meeting.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll send that out for sure, Beth. And yeah, I'm not sure how involved you are with 4Kids, but certainly we're always happy to support if folks need help putting together, an op-ed, and the facts, but you need to collate them and things like that. So yeah, we'll share those resources in the follow-up email, and that's a great resource that we'll put on our website as well. Thanks so much, Gada. I have a question from Jamie about framing solar energy affordably. Jamie, do you want to jump on and share?
I've noticed here in Edmonton, the oil and gas industry do a great job of framing oil and gas as essential for keeping costs down. And I'm wondering if you have any resources of sort of how we can do that for solar. The upfront costs are kind of high for a lot of families, but also businesses or the city, even though like the savings become clear pretty quickly. And that's why I was just wondering if you have any advice or resources about how we can sort of get past that upfront cost fear that I think a lot of businesses and even the city.
Yeah, and that's definitely is missing. Like that's well, I have to think about this question, but it's just, the affordability research that I mentioned, it looked at climate electric policies, and it looked at EVs and heat pumps, which are climate technologies, and again looked about what why what do people care about or matters to them according like for these ones. And again, it's like the assumption was that they really about these costs, but it's not just it's not just about these costs that is matter to them. I think is that really what is missing is that the reliability of these technologies and the fairness, as I mentioned in the previous presentation, of like these are important points, and it's just this is something that has not been done. So through the research, for example, they were asked about incentives and they were effective, and people said, no, they are not effective. So they received them, even if those who received the money. And the reason they see that they're effective, not effective, because they didn't they didn't really connect it to the technology. So in short, is that I would say its cost is one thing, but it's just this reliability, affordability, and just how easy it is to for them to get or install these. These are the major points. I will also point out to research that's done by a senior advisor, Louise Comeau, about renewables. She asked really that her research was focused on renewable, and I'll be happy to add this in the resource. So she did resources about this resistant to solar and renewables, because what's been really found usually is that people at principle they support these technologies, but it's not in our backyard. That's where the opposition is like, okay, this is not happening here. I'm not, and so she's done this research, and again, I'll share them in the resources if, to look at. Yeah, and again with a list of other resources.
Thanks so much, Jamie. There was a question also, Jason had to go, but he wanted to know what are the feelings for parents in the ecosystem, such as construction workers, architects, solar, oil and gas, etc. Does anyone have partners with deeper insight into that?
Yeah, I think that is interesting. That is, yeah, this is a good question. Yeah, if we look at okay, so it's really a question also about again, it's just this emphasizes the point of the stories, and we are at Re.Climate building the messenger mobilization program, where we try to get people from the same group. So, for example, doctors doctors talking to other doctors and technicians talking to others, and that's where the influence is happens. I don't have information about, like, what are the perspectives between parents in sector versus parents who are not. But I would say is that I know a lot of parents, like from my personal experience, who work in the sector, but at the same time they care about climate, and but that's really what they have to do. So talking to others who share the same experience is just, I would say, would be the really the most influential way to, not necessarily, I mean, to transition from the sector, but also is like um, to know. And it's again back to the point about people want to feel things that they can do. So if you ask someone to leave their job and they at the moment they're not able to do, that's not something that they can do. But it would be helpful is that to talk to people about things that they do at the moment and offer these options. So when they see that there are these options that they can do in hand, that's where the resistance declines, and that's where they see that they want to do it. And it's like, just people also want to feel good about themselves. So if you say to them, if they feel that the message tells them that they are not good people, then they are resistant more to it. So again, making people feel good about who they are, but also offering options and feeling that they are agent and can do and change the things. But I don't have information exactly about, the perception and the attitude. But that's really a great question. It will be interesting to look at of like how is that, how people or parents perceive climate and climate action different depending on where they work.
Yada. If folks have any other questions, you can put them in the chat. I don't know if the person who's interested in the impact of litter, do you have a question that you'd like to share out loud or any particular thoughts on that?
Sure, I can just ask a few questions since you guys are experts with working with children, particularly because I'm kind of new to working with small kids. And from my experience, what I'm finding is a lot of the kids are very sensitive. And so my kids know about that and what that means. Um, but it's kind of hard finding that balance when you're in a group situation with lots of different kids, when you're explaining that litter can make animals get sick, and then another kid brings up that or die, and then there are kids there who don't know what die means. And as a parent, like I try to avoid getting into that situation where I'm exposing another kid, a parent's kid, to something that they should have that opportunity to explain to them because it's such a sensitive thing. And so yeah, that's one of the challenges that I've been facing is talking about litter and how it impacts animals without getting gory or without traumatizing some kids. Yeah. So love your input on how do you do that really, yeah, when working with kids.
Yeah, do you have sort of research around specifically? We did run a session recently with Britt Ray, who's a person who is really interested in climate distress and has some resources around, how do you navigate climate distress and particularly maybe with kids. So I could definitely share that with you, but I don't know, Geta, if you have any more insights to share on how to navigate, sort of the emotional weight of these topics, especially with different demographics.
Yeah, not really. I mean, youth and children are one of the groups that we hope we can work around, but it's not been there's not been an opportunity. I think is that also just like maybe just one of the things that like a lot of the things that we as adults do and comfort us, I would say apply to the kids. I don't know if you're familiar with this narrative triangle. It's like how to talk to people, and this narrative triangle offers this balance between understanding the challenge and understanding the hope. So this narrative triangle consists of three corners. One is the challenge. What is the issue? Why is it impacting us? And then the other one is the choice, what we can do about it. And then the opportunity, which is like, what are the benefits that we're going to get if we get this opportunity? So I don't know, like I can't be like 100% confident about this is like because we haven't done this research. But in my perspective is that we need to have this conversation with the kids about the challenge, but also if it seems really a big problem and there's nothing that they can do, that's where it becomes really impactful for them. Um, but offering what realistic hope, it means of like you as a kid is like, what can you do about it? What are the things that they can do? What can they contribute? And this is really helpful in dealing with this. And I mean, anxiety research, I believe it's proven over and over that feeling that you can do something about it is really it's really helpful in tackling the issue. So it's important to highlight this. It's a problem. It is an issue. It's a threat. However, there are things that we can do, and we can do it together. So and again, it's just the advice about making kids feel that yes, you might see people that they don't care, but there are other people who care about it, and there are other people, so they feel that it's not just them who struggle with that emotion, but there are other kids and other adults and who are doing this. So yeah, again, it's like some of the tips I believe just we've just talked about apply also to kids and how they would process the issue.
Thanks, Geta. And I see that some folks have shared some other specific resources in the chat around how to teach climate change to young kids. So thank you so much for sharing that. Anyone else have a question that they want to ask before we wrap up? If you do, feel free to jump off of mute and ask. Maybe we're good for now. Okay, well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Yeah, I think this is really great sort of overview and session, and really appreciate your time, Geta, and insights and research. There's so much great insight for the movement and for parents and whoever else is doing this work through your research. So really appreciate that. If you have other questions, feel free to reach out to me. We are, continue to work with Re.Climate, and we can, share those questions and see if we can share some insights as well. And I did share the link to the feedback session or the feedback survey in the chat here, but I'll share it again with folks, and hopefully we'll see you at the next session. Geta, do you have any final thoughts? Yeah, you raised your hand.
I want I wanted just to ask a question for everyone. It's like I've shared some of these challenges, but I'm really curious. What are the challenges that you mostly face? I mean, some of these were obvious through the questions, but what do you see as, top challenge that you as a parent and climate advocate or, concerned about climate face in your work or, in your daily life?
Thoughts you can throw in the chat or come off mute if you'd like.
getting people. Okay, I see some of these. Thank you, Beth. Thank you, Meg.
Anyone else have thoughts on that? Seed oils, yes, Meg. That is a weird one right now.
Helpful.
That's great. I think also in the survey, you'll see if something else comes to mind, you can also share there. We're asking, what are the other topics you want to learn about, or are there specific challenges you face? We'd love to hear about that too, to make sure what we're offering is useful. Any other questions or anything, Gada, before we wrap up?
No, thank you. Thank you so much, Gabrielle, for organizing this, and thanks to everyone who joined. Really appreciated the time with everyone here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Gada. And yeah, we'll be sharing the recording and the slides with you all for reference. And yeah, let us know what else you are interested in learning about around communications and how best to navigate this challenge. We definitely want to be as supportive as possible. Yeah, great. Thank you all.